Well, welcome everybody here today for another one of our Mid-America Regional Older Adult Ministries webinars. And one endeavor that we always like to look for in the Mid-America region is intersectionality. How do ministries of that are passions of one group of people meet the passions of another group of people serving in our region? And today I think we have that, as we are joining with representatives from Alliance Q and our older adult ministries and various local components together for a wonderful discussion on ministering to LGBTQ older adults and beyond. So I want to acknowledge Jan Airy, who is our coordinator for older adult ministries and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ of Mid-America. And I always string that with, she is here made possible through a wonderful grant through the National Benevolent Association. So again, they partner with us, and we're so grateful that we have that relationship going. And we are looking for next year. Our plans are to share what we have accumulated and have learned and how we have grown with the entire general church. So we're going national, if you will. International is our hopes, because what we learn and how we navigate ministry in these changing times is so important. And we want everybody to feel equipped, as I feel, better equipped through Jan's efforts. So without further ado, Jan, welcome, and please introduce our guests and our program today.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you all for joining. I'm going to ask Melissa to speak in just a moment, but I'll just make a brief acknowledgement too, as I am very grateful for all of you to have joined, and that this topic has been a major emphasis through our NBA grant for this year, even though we acknowledge that the conversation about older adults is something that's been lacking in many churches. The conversation about LGBT older adults is non-existent in many cases. So we are acknowledging that here we are trying to find better ways to create better communication. I imagine that all of you are on the edge of that. You know about all of this already because you're here today. And we have wonderful leadership that's going to offer us some new insights and new directions and ways of thinking and looking and acting about this topic of LGBTQ older adults. So I want to introduce first Kim, Dr. Kim Leon, who is one of the co-directors or an assistant director and hospice chaplain in the Columbia area, and also Cheryl Whalen, who is here in St. Louis, but is the National Director of Education and Coordination for SAGE. And she will tell you more about SAGE, which is a national organization. So welcome and thank you to both of them, who are very uniquely equipped to be leading us today. I'd ask you to ask your questions, but if you'd rather save them for the end, we will have a Q&A time. And we anticipate that at our closing at noon, we will be able to email to each of you the resource listing that Kim and Cheryl have put together in thanks for your participation. But let me now introduce Melissa for her welcome from Alliance Q. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Jans. Welcome to each of you and to friends who will watch our recording later. On behalf of Alliance Q, the Disciples LGBTQ+ Alliance, we are grateful for your interest in learning and discussing, exploring, and deepening our welcome and affirmation of LGBTQ+ older adults. Noted, I am Melissa Guthrie Loy. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the Executive Director and Minister with the Alliance. Many thanks to the facilitators today and to the Christian Church Disciples of Christ of Mid-America for hosting this event. We are glad you are here, and I lift that up because our organization had its beginnings 40 plus years ago as GLAD, the Gay, Lesbian, and Affirming Disciples Alliance. We lift up the witness and work of our founders and our elders who have made way for us. Our mission, our call, is to join in God's work of transforming the Christian church, disciples of Christ, into a just and inclusive church that welcomes persons of all gender expressions and sexual identities into the full life and full leadership of the church. You won't be surprised that we believe each person is made in the image of God, each of us a vital part of God's love story. Too many people have experienced unwelcome, and so I thank you again for joining in this conversation. LGBTQ plus older adults bring gifts to the body of Christ, to our communities. You bring gifts. I wonder, as we lean in, if you will interact with me. Unmute yourselves, if you will. Paul and Kim, you're trusting me. If you can unmute yourselves, I invite you to repeat after me. I am a gift.
I
am a gift.
gift.
Looking at your screen, find a face and speak to that person and say, you are a gift.
Doug,
Hey,
you are a
you are a
gift.
gift.
It is a gift to have this conversation with you today. Let's lean in. I will put in the chat window some information about our organization and how to be in touch with us.
Thanks, Melissa. Cheryl, I believe, is going to begin our conversation now on particular needs of the community we're speaking about.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, Kim. I'm really honored to be here today. Paul, were you going to share the slide deck?
Oh, it went away. I had it called. Do you want to
Okay.
show it yourself, Cheryl? I'll be happy to.
I don't think I even have mine up.
Okay, here we
So,
go.
Okay.
I'll get the.
While we're getting that up and going, I'll just share a little bit about SAGE. So SAGE is the oldest and largest nonprofit in the country dedicated to serving LGBT older adults. And we really look at ourselves as providing the aging voice and the LGBT community and the LGBT voice and the aging community. So I'm always excited to be a part of this work and to share with you all today. I've worked with SAGE now at the local level and the national level for over 15 years. I founded the SAGE affiliate in St. Louis, Missouri back in 2008, and then joined with, merged our affiliate with SAGE of Promo Fund in 2015, and then joined the national work as the working with the National Resource Center on LGBT aging in 2015. So I'm always excited to present here in Missouri because I still live here, and it's very close at heart to call Missouri home and to be a part of the work here. So today we're going to look at a brief overview of LGBT aging, some of my thoughts on open and affirming congregations and the work that I believe we're all called to be a part of. And then I'll turn it over to Kim, who's going to speak with you more about affirming ministries for LGBT elders. So we know today that there are upwards of 3 million LGBT older adults across the country. And we expect that this number is only going to rise, over the coming years, with an anticipated growth to upwards of 7 million LGBT older adults by 2030. And, oftentimes people think that LGBT older adults only live in, major urban metropolitan areas, but we know that's not true. LGBT older adults, reside in all communities across the country, in small rural communities, to larger metropolitan areas. And so we really encourage folks to think about who may be sitting in your pews on a Sunday morning that may either, identify as LGBT or have a family member that identifies as LGBT. Do you want to move to the next slide, Paul? Thank you. So, I come to the first question. Do you know an LGBT older adult that's a member of your congregation? And you can type in the chat box if you know of someone, just yes or no. Okay, so it's looking like most everybody knows of an LGBT older adult who's in their congregation. And, I would expect this to be the case because you are, open and affirming congregations. If I was to ask this in a different type of setting, either of a congregation that's working to, becoming more affirming, or maybe hasn't even started down this path, and also in mainstream aging organizations, we would often, have people kind of pause and say, I'm not sure if I know an older LGBT person. And, oftentimes the reason we don't know someone is because we haven't paused to ask the question about, how do you identify? Or we assume that all people identify as straight or non-LGBT. And so, that can oftentimes lead us to not knowing the story of the people that we're working with. And so we really encourage folks to pause and, take the opportunity to really get to know the folks that you're serving and provide the opportunity for people to share about who they are and what their lives, have meant to them and what's important in their lives. And this is how we get to know if folks identify as LGBT. So for those of you that, that are already doing this work, I really appreciate that and hope that you can continue to help other, congregations become open and affirming. So I wanted just to take a moment to think about the spiritual themes in the lives of LGBT elders. We actually created a fact sheet with the help of some faith leaders a couple of years ago. And this fact sheet looked at LGBT experiences as well as spiritual themes. So part of what we know that, can really be a place of ongoing struggle and can lead folks to not being a part of their larger community are some of the LGBT experiences, including having shrinking social supports and networks. We know that LGBT older adults are less likely to have children and more likely to live alone. And this always causes me a sense of concern and great pause. Who's going to be there to support the LGBT older adult who doesn't have that social network of care partners? And if they're a part of a faith community, they may be turning to that faith community for some of this support. So how can we better support, LGBT older adults and really all older adults who may have a lacking support system? Many LGBT older adults have experienced a history of trauma, discrimination, harassment, and stigma. These are all things that can also, keep us from seeking supportive services, because we aren't wanting to place ourselves in situations where we may experience ongoing discrimination, stigma, and trauma. So we may close in and keep ourselves closed off from the broader community during times of need. Many LGBT older adults have experienced rejection by their families of origin. Again, this accounts for that shrinking social support network. It's oftentimes the next of kin who offer that level of support and care for older adults as they age. And for many LGBT older adults, it's really our families of choice that may be providing that support to us. LGBT older adults have also experienced religious discrimination and alienation. And again, this can keep us separated from, faith communities that oftentimes provide that level of support and care, especially at end of life and during the aging process. And then historical, recognition of legal and financial insecurity throughout a lifetime. So these are some of the challenges that we see with LGBT aging and older adults. But then there's also the opportunity to look at the spiritual themes that can really help engage LGBT older adults as they age and during end of life. And this fact sheet calls out 7 themes that I wanted to highlight with you today. Love and belonging. People need to love and to be loved and to know that they belong. And a faith community oftentimes provides that sense of love and belonging. Forgiveness and reconciliation, especially as LGBT older adults become more aware of their own mortality. They may have a need to forgive people and to be forgiven. And again, a faith community can help with this sense of forgiveness and reconciliation. Trust. Trust can be very hard to gain with older adults, especially if that trust has been broken. And oftentimes there's that sense of trust that's been broken with our faith communities. So open and affirming congregations can help, rebuild that sense of trust with those faith traditions that folks have had. Hope. Some older adults may feel despair at what lies ahead with health challenges, loss of some capacities, bereavement, and even their own mortality. LGBT elders may even be more cynical based on a lifetime of discrimination and negative experiences with the world around them. So a faith community can really help instill that sense of hope. Meaning. Older adults may express a sense of meaningless and boredom. We need to all know that our lives do matter, that what we did in our past mattered, and that our present and future also matter. And again, faith communities can help people recognize the meaning that they've had in their life and their purpose in life. Gratitude. There's a need and desire to express thankfulness. And it's very strong, especially at a time of leavings, endings, and achievements. Some LGBT elders may want to express gratitude for how much safer our society is and how, we are sometimes finding our way back home to our faith communities. So open and affirming churches can really help with that sense of gratitude. And identity. All too often, aging can be accompanied by a mental decline, dementia, or periods of confusion or loss of memory. In care settings, a person may need to be able to continue living their authentic lives, and faith congregations can help them continue to live that life and to acknowledge who they are and to really help them, continue with their sense of identity in the world around them. So, these are some of the spiritual themes that I wanted to really highlight today as a part of this work. And I'm also a storyteller. So these next slides that I want to share with you today are really part of a story that I've experienced in my life through stories and just my personal life. As I was preparing this presentation and speaking with Jan, this picture of a stained glass just really kept resonating with me. And the church and stained glass windows have a long history, often used to help tell our stories, our religious stories, our faith stories. But let's consider for a moment that the individual stained glass pieces represent each person who sets foot in the church and considers the church a part of their family, home, community, and gives so much meaning to their life. For so many LGBT people, faith in church continues to be central to their lives. Yet there are some who have felt alienation from their faith home and their church. I recall in my church when the pastor referred to LGBT people as an abomination. This was over 25 years ago, but that Sunday stays with me. And that was the day when I no longer considered my church my home. And when I left the church, I took a piece of that stained glass with me. Next slide, Paul. Consider the family who left the church after the church refused to have a funeral service for their child who is transgender. They took a piece of the stained glass with them. Imagine having people in your church tell you that you are sick and can be cured if only you have faith and pray to be cured. They took a piece of the stained glass with them. Next slide. These are the stories and real experiences of so many LGBT people who have felt lost and abandoned by a faith they once held dear. For each LGBT person and family that leaves the church, they also take part of the stained glass window with them. Many carry these often traumatic memories throughout their lives and are seeking an opportunity to reconcile their faith. If you can go back to the stained glass, Paul. There you go. Thank you. It may be years of spiritual searching, but faith often remains strong. And when LGBT people and their families find open and affirming churches, they often feel that they can return to their faith communities at a time when they need it most. And they start to rebuild their own stained glass window and story of their faith. Consider the gay man in hospice who was befriended by a chaplain. The chaplain sat with him and heard for the first time his struggles with religion because he was gay. Through their time together, the man was able to reconcile his faith. And I've always hoped that this provided him with peace during his final days. I also want to share about a friend of mine who's in her 80s. I'm a part of her support circle right now. And she shared with me recently that her pastor saved her from losing Christianity forever. Those words really hit me. And I recognize just how important her faith is to her and how important her open and affirming church has been to her. Her pastor today is a part of her support circle as her dementia is progressing and her need for community support is only increasing. Open and affirming churches can play a central role in the lives of LGBT older adults who want to reconcile their faith and heal some of the traumas and memories that they've carried for so many years. Open and affirming congregations can be that place where LGBT older adults find love and belonging, forgiveness and reconciliation, trust, hope, meaning, gratitude, and continue with their sense of identity as LGBT Christians as they come back to their church homes. So this story, it's personal. Everything that I shared with you today are stories that I've heard of people who have felt lost from their faith communities. And I hope that you will continue to have this picture of the stained glass with you as you think about how your church can be, more supportive of older LGBT adults in your congregation, as well as other older adults who may be looking for that place of faith and reconciliation. Next slide. I do want to share again that on our website, lgbtagingcenter.org, we have 3 fact sheets that were developed specifically around spirituality, aging, and end of life. And I encourage you all to, visit the website and download these fact sheets for your own use. And I will place the website in the chat box. And I'm now going to turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Cheryl. So Cheryl has given us a great overview of some spiritual needs of LGBTQ older adults. And I want to now focus in on how we as the church can welcome and affirm LGBTQ older adults, both within our congregations and in the wider community. Many, if not most communities, lack resources for our LGBTQ elders. I know, here in Columbia and in many communities, the LGBTQ resources that do exist are oftentimes focused on and geared toward youth, which is certainly a critical need. And at the same time, there are not a lot of resources for our older adults who are part of the LGBTQ community and have some unique needs and experiences in the ways that Cheryl has highlighted for us. And they need our support as well. Now, I don't know if this is going to work, but the picture on the slide is actually linked to a video clip. I don't know if we can play that or not, from a documentary called Gen Silent. If you click on the picture, Paul, it may not work.
Let me see.
Okay.
I think I may have to stop the sharing and then, because I have to turn on the audio, right? So
you will have to click on a button to allow you to share audio.
okay, so I'll stop the share. Hello, everyone, again. We'll come right back.
If it does not work, that's okay, because I have a link. The information of how to get to that video is on the resource list that we will send out.
Okay, I think it might. We'll give it a try.
Okay.
Well, I'm not seeing the little arrow that you usually see.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah, if we can just go back to that slide. So Gen Silent is a documentary that gives a really good picture of the needs of LGBT older adults and puts a face on it. So I highly recommend watching that documentary to educate ourselves and our congregations. Sharing that with people in your congregation can be a great way to put a face on these issues and provide some education, which is part of our role as Open and Affirming Ministry, is to help provide education for people on issues related to LGBTQ life. Church being a place where our older adults often already are present, I think we have a natural role in meeting the needs of LGBTQ older adults. Many of our congregations already have older adult ministry, and we may also have Open and Affirming Ministry, but as we were talking about at the beginning, the intersectionality of those two is a place where I think there is a need for us to focus, and where we have an opportunity to reach people whose needs are not being met currently by the community or by the church. We know that many LGBT older adults are also not part of churches because of often church inflicted trauma that they may have experienced. So if you can go ahead and advance to our next slide, Paul. So doing some outreach into the community, I think, is also an important piece of this ministry for the church. And one way to do that, and this is something that Sage has developed, and there are many resources on their website with more information about how to implement what they call Sage tables. These are intergenerational gatherings where people gather to share a meal of some kind and conversation. These have been taking place on Zoom during the pandemic, but in person once that is safe to do. And they center LGBTQ issues and community. Allies are included. It's not exclusive to only LGBTQ participants. And Cheryl's putting the link into the chat for where to go. This is the picture you see is a clip from a video that has some participants in this activity talking about what they got out of it. That, you know, it's a really, one of the needs that Cheryl mentioned was the isolation and the need for belonging. And we know that's true for many people beyond the specific population of LGBTQ older adults. It can be a much more of a need for this group, but this is a need for many of our older adults and for many of our younger adults as well. And this is discussed in the video, that it really meets a need for belonging, for knowing the history of the LGBTQ community, and a way to really learn from one another and connect. So I think that is can be a really powerful way to do this kind of ministry, and it can include people within our congregation. It can be a wider event open to the community. Paul, will you go ahead and advance to the next slide for me? As I mentioned already, the Jen Silent movie and screening that movie, I think, is another idea for how to shed some more light on the issues and the needs. Because we do know that many LGBTQ older adults are not necessarily connected with a church, I think connecting with our local LGBTQ centers and with our local senior centers and letting them know, hey, our church is a safe and welcoming place for people, is another way that we can reach out to people in the community and let people know. Because I think it's been talked about a little bit in this webinar already, but the unwelcome that many people have experienced and felt, I think puts the onus on us as the church to let people know that we are welcoming. It's really on us to let people know that we are safe, we are affirming, because there is such a history of people not being welcomed, not being affirmed. Another area of opportunity, I think, within our congregations is to provide LGBTQ affirming pastoral care. And some of Cheryl's stories really highlighted that need, particularly for people at the end of life and for people who are living in assisted living, nursing homes. They, in living in those settings, are already giving up a lot of their autonomy and independence. And when they enter those settings as an LGBT person, they don't know if it is safe to be out. Many go back into the closet because they are afraid of being rejected, being abused. You know, there are many people involved in their care, and some of them might be open and affirming, some of them may not be. So that is a very vulnerable position for people to be in. And I think as an open and affirming church, we can be that person who is there to provide pastoral care that is safe and affirming for people. One of the resources that we'll share is a tip sheet for specific to pastoral care. And so it'll have some of these ideas that I'm going to talk about, but you know, one piece of it, I think, is just understanding the issues and challenges. So, for example, if we have our elders in our congregation and other lay people in our congregation who go out and do visits, making sure that they have some training and education on providing affirming pastoral care. Avoiding assumptions about the gender of the elder and or their partner's gender. So just avoiding assuming that they have a partner of a different gender. I think our care has to be trauma informed, as we've discussed. Many LGBTQ elders have experienced trauma related to religion, discrimination based on their sexual orientation or their gender identity. So we have to come at this, I think, with a little bit of a trauma-informed approach and being aware that that may be present. We can communicate that we are a safe person in small ways to help build that trust, which is, as Cheryl pointed out, a process. We need to, I think, in providing pastoral care, there's always a trust building process, but this is going to become very important in providing care for LGBTQ elders, especially if it's a person that we don't already know. So some of the tips are given for communicating that might be, wearing a rainbow pin, or I know a pastor who has a rainbow sticker on his phone, and he makes a point to turn his phone upside down to just send a signal to people that he is a safe and affirming person. So it's a small thing, but a way to communicate to people that we are a safe person for them to talk to. And I think this is related to one of the key spiritual needs at the end of life for everyone, and in particular ways for our LGBTQ elders, is that reconciling that often comes up. And so when we can provide affirming and inclusive interpretations of scripture and ways to help people integrate their sexual orientation, their gender identity, and their spirituality, I think that can serve a really important need, particularly for older adults and those that are at end of life. So I think for me, the bottom line is that our ministry for LGBTQ older adults really goes beyond a specific program or a specific group. It comes down to what is our message. And because our message about LGBTQ people affects not just the people in the pews, but it forms attitudes and affects the way everyone is treated in the community. So, the care providers that are caring for our LGBTQ elders in the nursing homes and assisted living, their views are shaped by what they've heard from churches. So I think that's a really key piece for me, is that when we preach a message of love, inclusion, and affirmation, everyone benefits. And so with that, I think we will go ahead and open it up for some Q&A.
Feel free to unmute yourself, friends, and just throw a question, or you can put it in the chat and to me personally if you prefer to, and I can read it.
I'd like to ask Cheryl and Kim to each perhaps give some additional tips on working toward reconciliation when people of the LGBT community are wanting or looking to join a church community, I feel that churches are maybe not informed or aware of how they might do that in an intentional sort of way. Might you offer a little bit more on that?
Kim, did you want to go first?
You can go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay. I think one of the most important things that a church can do is to be visible. To make sure that the LGBT community knows that you're affirming, to reach out to LGBT community groups and invite them to be a part of events at the church, to host a sage table, as Kim said. I think that's a great way that folks can involve their community. And I think it's making sure that people know that you're there and that you're available to be a part of their support network.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would highlight. I think also, the church can participate in local LGBTQ events, like having a booth at Pride Fest. Some of our local churches do that here. I know they do that in other areas as well. So just, ways that we can make it clear to people that it is a welcoming and affirming space. And others may have ideas as well. So I would invite anyone who has thoughts about this to share their ideas or things that you've done or seen other congregations do.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Cheryl. I look forward to hearing if there are suggestions and previous experiences. I hear from a lot of individuals that they will not go into our church buildings or join us virtually because of the pain that they have previously experienced. And so I do echo the absolute need for our ministries to communicate that we are open and affirming and to invite people in. But the reality also is that our ministries need to go out too. And so as it is safe in our communities, we need to be showing up at LGBT centers. We need to put our names in those places and have a presence in order to start building relationships so that people see us visibly and start to trust us. It's always our suggestion that relationships will matter more than our pride flags or our labels as open and affirming. So by going out into our communities, we will be communicating, right? We will be showing up and letting folks know that we want to be in relationship with them.
Yeah, and I would just echo that, Melissa, that I've encountered a lot of fellow LGBT community members who do not want to step foot in a church, who really, the trauma that they've experienced is to that amount that they've lost trust in the church and have felt a lot of pain. And so that can be challenging. And I think just to remember that, for every person that may feel that lack of trust, there's that other person who's seeking to rebuild that relationship. And so it's being there and being open to hearing even the stories that hurt and that may also hurt, from a perspective of the church. That is when we're open to hearing those stories that we can better understand, the traumas that folks have experienced and be there for those that are wanting to come back. So.
When I hear the term elders, think of one, older adults, but I realize there's many facets. So elders are the position of privilege of serving at the table, responsibility in congregations, but there's also the wisdom elder tradition where intentional mentoring and intergenerational advocacy goes on. Do you have any stories of, especially in the church, of LGBTQ older adults or elders seeking out and identifying with young people, regardless of their orientation, of passing on wisdom through life and life struggles?
I don't know that I have a specific story off the top of my head, Paul, but I do think that's where the concept of the sage table can really come in to benefit congregations. Usually the youth programs in churches have a lot of enthusiasm and people want to be engaged with the youth programs. And so how do we bring those two together? So outreach for LGBT youth and outreach for LGBT older adults, and having that sage table where they can learn from one another. And I think that's, a really great opportunity, for that cross-generational sharing and mentorship.
Thank you.
As a therapist, I have been fortunate to be aware of churches in the community that are open and affirming. And when I have clients who express their sorrow at not being involved in a church anymore because of the way they have been treated, I recommend several churches usually, and tell them that they would be welcome there, that they would receive, a different experience. I wonder if there's a way to get the word out. I mean, there are a lot of us in the community, social workers, licensed professional counselors, and counseling psychologists who need that information about what churches are open and affirming. I just feel fortunate that I think I have known. There may be ones I don't know about, to get that word out somehow to the counseling community.
One recommendation I have there, Mary, there's another organization called the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association, and therapists who are LGBT therapists or LGBT welcoming therapists oftentimes will have their name on a list of therapists in the community. So you could go into your state and look for all the therapists that are a part of Missouri, if you're in Missouri, and make sure that those therapists have a list of your churches that are open and affirming. So that would be one way to help get the word out.
Well, I know we have a group within the American Psychological Association, of course, a division. I belong to the feminist division, and we have a whole section within that. But yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question about retirement communities and nursing homes. Is there any kind of designation or or language to use when asking about those in terms of understanding places that have a culture of inclusion, acceptance, so forth?
So there's a couple of programs that SAGE is a part of that are going to help to identify more and more long-term care communities that are welcoming. One is the SAGE Care Training and Credentialing Program. There's a list of organizations across the country, including long-term care communities, who have gone through training to help ensure that they're LGBT culturally competent. So that's one place that you can start. And that website is, I'm putting it in the chat box, sageusa.care. And then another new program that SAGE has partnered with the Human Rights Campaign Foundation on is called the Long-Term Care Equality Index. And I'm actually the lead for SAGE on that program. And I'm also putting it in the chat box. So thelei.org. Through this program, we are specifically working with long-term care providers. So independent living communities, continuum care communities, skilled nursing, assisted living, and hospice based facilities. Not the in-home hospice, but the hospice homes. And our goal there is to identify those long-term care communities that want to be open and welcoming to LGBT older adults, working with them to update policies and procedures, as well as go through training to help ensure a community of care that's supportive for LGBT older adults. Our first report on that program actually is scheduled to go out at the end of this month. And so you'll be able to see long-term care communities across the country who are part of the early adapters for being LGBT inclusive. Where our hope is that this program will, continue to grow over time. But we know that this is our first, for many long-term care communities, this is the first time that anyone has asked them to adopt LGBT inclusive policies and procedures. So you're going to see a small sampling at this point, but it will grow over time. United Church Homes, which many of you are familiar with, they are one of the leading communities in this work for being LGBT inclusive. In the St. Louis area, we also have the St. Andrews communities who are going to be a part of this first report. And hopefully we will see some other communities coming on, soon after this report is out.
And Sarah, I'll add to that. One of the resources on the resource list that we'll be sending out is a fact sheet that suggests specific questions to ask on how to find a home that is open and affirming. And so that will be on your resource list.
Thanks, that's super helpful. If I could take a mini diversion to you, Kim, or maybe Sally, is there a place you would point to in Columbia that rises to the top, or are we going to be the late adopters?
My guess is we'll be late adapters. Although Lenore Woods, because Lutheran Senior Services is making diversity, equity, and inclusivity a big push right now, that maybe down the road they will be. But right now, they've had couples there at Lenore, and over the years that I've been there, and for the most part, I think they've been accepted. There's been a few little incidents, but for the most part, I think everyone accepted them because they got to know them as people, And
I think one key for any place is how much emphasis do they put on staff training? Because if they're more invested in training their staff, it's going to be more consistent versus places where, you could have a CNA who's accepting, but you might not. And, if they put minimal effort into staff training, I think, and so I think Lenore LSS does put more investment into staff training than some other places do, but
and I've been invited to sit on the team at Lenore Woods as a community member, and they literally are just getting started. And we had our first team meeting last week, and they had someone from their corporate office in St. Louis was with us, and she said that Lenore was the very first community to even form a team because they just had a workshop for everybody. So hopefully they'll be on the ground floor and lead the way, but we'll see.
So I wanted to ask, are these reports that you're sending out, are they nationwide? Because I'm not where you guys are. I'm clear up in Washington State. So is this nationwide?
Yeah, so the long-term care equality index report, it is nationwide.
Good.
And, you know, for those of you that have connections with long-term care communities, you know, I would encourage you, we have some fact sheets on the LEI website around the importance of LGBT inclusive long-term care. I would encourage you, if you were connected with long-term care communities, to share some of these resources with them and let them know that there are LGBT elders who are seeking their support and need their support. And, you know, we're really looking for leaders across the country who want to step up and be a part of LGBT inclusive care.
Thank you.
Yep. And I'm happy to strategize with anybody that, you know, wants to try and impact their community in this way.
Well, my church is in the process of going ONA. And I have to say, I'm kind of a newcomer to the LGBTQ community, but I am an elder, so in both ways. So it's good to know, because that's something I would like to bring to my church.
Okay. Just going to say, there for a while, I was making the rounds in St. Louis on, seemed like major holidays. I was being invited to churches to come and speak. So I'm always open to presentations if anybody needs a presentation in your community, as long as it's by Zoom.
And I saw a little while ago, Melissa posted in the chat the point that people may be more likely to visit our churches online. So I just wanted to make sure it didn't fly by too fast for people to catch that. And a link to a tip sheet with ways to make online spaces more inclusive.
And just to plug, Alliance Q provides sermons to download to show in church, and I was pleased as punch. I went to one of my little rural churches, and the pastor was on sabbatical, and there was an Alliance Q sermon on there. I could jump for joy.
We started using those
Yes.
to help our congregation. Yes.
And you know, I'm in the next 2 minutes. I would be remiss if I didn't mention there is a great need in the LGBT community for grief support. And I plug this every time I get a chance. I think whoever can step up and show that commitment to providing grief and bereavement support to the LGBT community, I think will go a long way to showing the open and affirming you know, aspects of LGBT ministry. So that's definitely a need. If anybody wants to talk to me further about that, I'd be happy to share. I get calls for that all the time. And unfortunately right now, my referral is to a Facebook group that's for LGBT grief. So I know that there's more things that can be done to support LGBT folks who are grieving.
I'm grateful that you lift that up, Cheryl, because Alliance Q is also contacted for pastoral care in that capacity. And sadly, we don't have a roster of ministers who can be contacted directly for that. But we know and are committed to changing that.
Well, if I can help in any way, let me know.
Great. I'll bother you. I'll be
okay.
To our facilitators, is there a way for you to, I've saved the chat, but perhaps some of the links that were dropped in the chat, if you will add them to your existing resource list, that would be great to have those summarized when you follow up with individuals.
I'll save the chat too to make it available as we can. And you know, with more intersections, our Mid-America Men and Friends Ministry partners with a network that has older gay men who are very much part of our circles. And so please contact me, and I'll put you in contact to how to join that support network. And then a soft little teaser: our next older adult webinar is going to be with our Mid-America Disciples Women on August 21st. Lisa, that's what my calendar says. Jan, do you want to say more about that and how we can continue this and other conversations?
Yes, thank you, Paul. The topic is women, but it is the importance of women historically and today in our church, especially in leadership and their influence around care and caregiving and sharing of wisdom. So we will be letting you know more, but watch for that and be sure to join us again. We'd love to have you come back for that one. And I want to take this opportunity to thank most sincerely Cheryl and Kim for your co-leadership. You did offer us so much information. It was wonderful. Yes, thank you. And Melissa, thank you for being present with us and for all the wisdom and thoughts that you have shared. If Paul or I might not have your email contact information in order to send you the resource listing that Kim and Cheryl have been referring to, please look in the chat. We've asked for that information there so that we can ensure that we have that for you. Jay, I think since you're not in Missouri, might be one that we are not easily going to be able to find.
That's
so
true.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. I think unless there's a closing word of wisdom at this moment, I would invite you to close your eyes or take a moment to share a prayer while I offer it with you. Oh God, we are so blessed by being together with each other. We are confident that we might be able to make a shift or a change. And we know that together with your spirit and with others, that is possible. Thank you today for the wisdom that's been shared and for the spirit that has lifted us up. As we step out away from our screen and into the rest of our day and the rest of our world. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. Blessings.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.